There's something that everyone who spends a significant amount of time studying penmanship or calligraphy will eventually encounter. It's this experience where you eventually realize that what you once thought was good isn't really that good anymore, okay? And good is a relative term. It's not the best term, but it's the simplest term to use, and I'm going to use it in this video. But we've all, if you've studied this stuff, or any type of art, any type of skill really, you look back and you look at what you used to do, you look at some of your old penmanship, your old calligraphy, and you say, oh, I used to think that was good, and now I can see all these mistakes in it, and I'm so much better now, and all that. So we've all had this experience if you've spent enough time studying calligraphy. And what's happening here is that as you study and you progress, you're actually increasing the resolution of your perception, okay? And we're going to get into that today. This idea of resolution, applying it to penmanship or art, is something that I first heard from David Grimes. He's an amazing penman. Definitely check him out. So I'm stealing the term from him. But it's this idea of resolution that is what we're going to talk about today. This is what I think is the most important thing to understand if you're studying and practicing penmanship, calligraphy, or really any kind of art. All right, so when you're starting out in penmanship, your resolution is pretty low. If you haven't studied a script, then you might look at two examples or specimens of a script, and you can tell, one or the other will be more visually appealing to you, but you're not able to articulate why that is. You can't get into the details and say, all the reasons why you like one better than the other. And that's because your resolution is low. When you're learning something, when you're trying to get better at something, the only way to get better is to perceive your mistakes, okay? And if your resolution isn't high enough to perceive your mistakes, then you're not going to see the mistakes and you're not going to get better. All right, so let's drill into this even further and talk about what I think are the two types of resolutions. We have idle resolution and active resolution is the way I'm separating it. Idle resolution is your ability to perceive while you're just looking at some writing that was already done, whether you wrote it or somebody else. And then active resolution would be your ability to perceive while you are in the act of writing. So let's talk about idle resolution first. Comparatively, I would say this is maybe an easier skill to acquire because you have the luxury of time and all kinds of tools you can use to analyze the work because you're not writing. So you can look at the work, you can spend time on it, you can use tools like rulers and protractors and an exemplar of ideal forms. You can use even like tools like slow motion video, which allow you to see things that you just can't see while you're in the act of writing. And the best way or the only way to train yourself, to train your idle resolution, is to actually study works of penmanship, whether they're your own, whether they're a contemporary penman or an historic specimen from the past, which I highly recommend doing because the historic stuff from the golden age of penmanship is really the best specimens we have, the highest quality penmanship. So I think it's worth it to spend some time doing that. And here I have a copybook from Zahner's copybook. This is Manual 96. And if we just look at one of the lines here, you can see this is a really great business hand. It's a very high-level business hand. Very few people can write like this today. But it's not without flaw. And if we use some tools like a ruler, we can easily see some of those flaws. So if I just put a ruler on the bottom, on the baseline of this, and I zoom in here, and I just try to just line this up as best I can, we can see that not everywhere are these letters hitting that baseline. So you can see when you get to this maketh word, almost the whole word until you get to the H is above the baseline just a little bit. You can even see things like look at this letter A in maketh. that's a really big fat A, while if you look at the word an or exact, that's more of the size A that fits in with the size of the script. So, you know, maybe you're looking at this, you just see amazing, beautiful penmanship, which it is, but you don't see any of the errors or flaws in it, and that just means that you need to work on your resolution and perception here. So your idle resolution hasn't gotten to the point where it can readily see the flaws in this, and that's okay, because if you haven't gotten to that point, you can use time and tools to enhance your resolution, and before you know it, you'll be seeing this stuff a lot quicker, and that just helps you with your own writing, analyzing your own work, and understanding these forms at a higher level. Okay, now I can quickly swap this out for what I would call a higher quality specimen, which would be from Mills Business Penmanship. This is definitely a more polished hand. While the Zahner example was probably done offhand, I would say, no copying and pasting, this might have been done, I mean, this could have been done offhand as well, because Mills was that great of a penman, but it's also possible that, you know, each one of these words was done separately, cut, copied, and pasted into a book, which was then used for printing. So there's just a lot less errors here. This is very polished, this is high level stuff. It's very hard for me. I mean, I've been studying penmanship for a while, and my resolution isn't really high enough to maybe even analyze this work, which tells me that I need to spend more time myself looking at stuff like this and seeing all of the good and bad qualities of the work. But we can use our ruler again, and we can see it's going to be harder for us to see the issues, but we can see that there are some there. So if we look at, like, let's say this word invoice, I mean, look at how well this word lays on the baseline, except for right here. So this letter N, that doesn't really come all the way down to the baseline. So super minor mistake, and something that most people would never notice. But when those little things add up, like they do in our own writing, that's when it really causes a problem. So yeah, I hope that just demonstrates kind of this idea of resolution even further, and how the quality of the penmanship makes it harder and harder to see that, and requires a higher resolution to identify the mistakes in higher qualities of penmanship. And if you apply that to yourself, if your resolution isn't high enough, you're not going to see your own mistakes, and you're not going to get better. All right, now let's talk about active resolution. Now it's a little different, because all you really have with active resolution is your senses and your brain's body, your ability to conceive and execute the work. But that's not exactly true. So we have all kinds of things that we can do, like drills and visual cues we can utilize to aid and train active resolution, okay? And I mean, obviously the first thing we use are guidelines. So if I'm writing on a line like this, when I'm writing, I use that guideline in the moment. That helps me put the pen and line up this on the baseline, so that my writing has that consistency of a baseline, okay? And we obviously do that with an X height. You can do that with slant lines. You know, you can put slant lines in with a protractor, and you can use those to measure, you know, in the moment while you're writing. You can use that as an aid to help guide your perception of slant while you're writing. So there's little tricks we can use. I mean, drills are another way. You know, let's say you're working on the letter T. I mean, obviously, you would never write, if you're writing, you would never write a T by itself. So one thing you can immediately do is just write a T by itself instead of writing the T in the context of a word. So that allows you to focus in on the T. But then you can focus even further. You could say, all right, in this T, I don't really like how much space I'm leaving there. So I'm going to focus on just that first part of the T, maybe even do a little retrace there, or even do a little retrace on that first part to really close up that gap. And then you can even focus in a little further and say, all right, I want to work on this exit, this turn here at the bottom. So you could say, all right, I'm going to do a little retrace down here real low and then come out. And this just gives your brain more time to think about the letter, think about the form, think about that turn, think about that very specific thing you're working on. And that's how we use drills to narrow our focus, to increase the resolution on what we're working on. And as you become a better penman, you're going to need to do that, because your errors are going to become smaller and smaller, harder to see. They're going to be hidden within the letters, in different parts of the letters. And it's going to become necessary to narrow in on those errors, on those issues, and then use things like drills and visual cues and aids to train yourself to then see and feel the movements that are required to make those forms. Okay? When you narrow in on it, you then perceive. So I can actually spend time perceiving what it feels like to make this motion. And that's another part of this perception. It's not just visual. It's also what it feels like in my arm and my body to make the movements that I need to make to achieve the forms that I want to achieve. Okay? All right, so I hope you can see how deep this stuff goes, this learning process, this penmanship, calligraphy stuff. And that's why I've been critical in the past of certain books, penmanship tips, tricks. That stuff really just scratches the surface of penmanship, and it actually in a way trains you to follow along in the shallow waters instead of encouraging you to dive into the deep end and make some of these discoveries for yourself. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do, is to think about this concept of resolution and perception, and think about what you can do, you know, what you aren't seeing and what you can do to see it. I think that's the huge thing. And I think the penmen that are really good, and the penmen in the past, I think they asked themselves that question, what am I not seeing? And they did whatever it took to be able to see it. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate that. If you want to learn more about traditional American penmanship, you can do so at writewithyourarm.com. Thanks for watching.